Your voice really matters. I've helped hundreds of people find their voice and feel really proud about what they say. It's important to be heard, and when your message really counts, you'll want to sound your best. Today, I'll be sharing with Adam 10 different ways to improve your voice so that you can speak clearly with confidence.
Okay, so joining me today on the Speakers Impact Network is Aneesa Chaudhry. And Aneesa is a voice and performance coach who specializes in helping people build confidence through the way that they speak and the way that they present themselves, especially with how their voice sounds. And I know for a lot of people it can be a bit of a worry because we all often hate the way that our voice sounds when we hear it played back. So Aneesa is joining us today to share some of her top tips for how she helps people build that confidence. And hopefully you at home can follow along with some of these tips and build that confidence for yourself. So Aneesa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Adam. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, and I'm excited for this because we were talking a little bit beforehand about this. There's so much that you can do with your voice, right? It's your main instrument. And the reason why I'm so happy that you can join us is because you're not just professionally speaking and presenting and coaching, but you're leading choirs and you're conducting and all sorts of exciting things. So you really know what it takes to get people's voice in good shape, right?
I'm a professional singer and I help coach people with their speaking. And of course, when you've got a choir or any group situation in front of you, you're working with lots of different variables for each of those people. And you're trying to get the best out of every single one of them. So it's very exciting work.
And I know so many people they're worried about their accents, they're worried about how they sound, they're worried about all sorts of mistakes that they make. But what I'd love for you to do is if you could take us through, and we've got a list of 10 sort of things, 10 tips that you recommend to get over that. So what do you think is the first one? Where do we start with getting our voice into a place where we can feel proud of it?
Well, you start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to be. So, before you even open your mouth, before you even walk up the steps onto a stage, it's really important that you are in control of what's going on up here. So your mindset has to be in the right place so that you can deliver really confidently and effectively. Mm-hmm. So everything has to start with a plan and structure. And whilst even with jazz or improvising when you're on stage, perhaps if you're trying to be funny with comedy, you can have an element of flexibility and be spontaneous, and that can be great. But even the most professional speakers plan and prepare what they're going to say and they practice it. So I say that you do need to start with your mindset, getting into a confident place where you really truly believe in what you want to deliver and in yourself. And then you have to have a plan where you've got an idea of the journey that you want to take your listeners on, that you feel comfortable with when you deliver. There's nothing worse than listening to someone kind of meander aimlessly in their thought process. You can almost watch them thinking, oh, what am I going to say next? And you're thinking, I'm feeling a bit shortchanged here because I'm not convinced that the person who's speaking to me right now really has spent the time and given me the respect they deserve by planning what they want to say and how they want to say it. And so when you plan and you do some preparation behind that planning, you can really think right down to a T about how you want to say something, what words you want to emphasize. And even in how I'm speaking to you now, you might notice that there are some things that I'm saying quite quickly and some things where I'm just pulling back the tempo, the speed of everything, so that you can take on board and it makes it much more accessible then for your listener when I'm talking. So if you've got a plan and you know, this is where I want to take my listeners, these are the key messages I want to put across, and this is the beginning, this is the middle with a few punctuated points in there and a very strong ending. It's just so much more compelling then for your audience than if you have no plan. So planning and structure. And then
That's
along, sorry,
I was
sorry.
going to say, sticking with planning and structure, that's really powerful, because oftentimes we will see a big difference between people who do plan and structure what they're going to say and those who don't. Because oftentimes we'll see people who are perhaps experts, lecturers, professors, they know a lot about their subject, but when they're speaking, they can be meandering all over the place and going down many different routes. Whereas sometimes we'll hear an actor who knows exactly what they've got to say, and they're practicing it to give it the most punch. And I love watching Shakespearean actors, because you know what they're going to say, because Shakespeare is always Shakespeare. You don't mess around with the lines, and what it's all about is that delivery, when you've got a plan of exactly what you're going to say, and then knowing how you're going to say it, how you're going to make people fall in love with what you're going to say, how you're going to get that impact. And oftentimes it's the people who know the least that plan the best, because they really have to plan. Sometimes when it's the old professors or the experts, they think, oh no, I don't need to plan, and it can turn into a right garbled mess, can't it?
Yeah, and I think, we're all individual. Every single one of us has something powerful to offer. And because we're different, that's what makes it interesting to listen to. Like, you just use Shakespeare as a brilliant example there. And I'd go on to say, even something like a well-rehearsed speech or a song. And I'll keep bringing parallels back to the world of singing, because essentially our bodies are our instrument, our voice is our voice, whether we are singing or speaking. It's just being used slightly differently in each of those contexts. But whether you're taking Shakespeare or a really well-known jazz standard, let's say, ultimately it's how you deliver it that makes it compelling for the listener, because we've all heard those songs, or we've all heard those speeches delivered again and again and again. So why is it more interesting when I get up and do it, or when you get up and do it? So you really want to think about, what is going to make you stand out from the crowd, and that has very much to do with your preparation, your physicality, your body language, and your voice, and then how you use all of those things in the delivery of your talk.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So what's number 2 on the list?
Well, just to sort of underneath that, gently to add what I call pre-hearing. So sometimes when you've come from a place of, okay, I know what my mindset tells me I want to do, and I know where I'm headed, but I can't quite see myself getting there. I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling anxious, all of those things. So when you do what's called pre-hearing, you're literally running the whole script in your head before you even hit the stage. So
Okay.
the advantage of doing that is you're seeing yourself powerfully deliver the talk that you want to give, and you're able to consciously decide where and how you want to put your key messages across. So even to practice articulating certain words can be really useful, because you might have an idea of a script which ultimately you'll want to come away from. You won't want to spend the whole time speaking as if you're reading a script, because that can be very boring. But if you have pre-heard everything that you want to say in your head of your voice and your delivery, and thought about what words you want to punctuate and how you want to deliver them, then it means the flow isn't too interrupted, because you've already gone through that in your head, and you might find that there's something that doesn't work and it needs changing, and then that's really good. Make mistakes, find out what doesn't trickle well off the tongue. There might be something that just keeps jolting and interrupting the natural flow of your amazing talk. So then you say to yourself, just goes back to the drawing board, get rid of that line, alter that the order of that sentence, or reprioritize, maybe your bullet points or something like that. So if you can hear yourself saying what you want to say in your head, and then you even start to just practice saying it, when you're almost reading, like you might see on television or on the stage, actors before they go on, they're mouthing the words, they're getting into the zone. they're practicing saying the words and seeing, what does it feel like? What does it feel like in my mouth? What does it feel like in my physicality? Because it's all connected. So the pre-hearing definitely
Oh, I,
on
I
the list.
love that you mentioned pre-hearing because oftentimes when I'm working with people who have English as a second or third language,
Yeah.
often one of the big struggles I'll see is that they'll practice what they've got to say, but in their own language because it feels good to them or feels natural to them, and then they'll say, "Oh, what's that word in English?" Because they will have forgotten or will have made a mistake, or maybe that word just doesn't exist in English, which happens more often than people might think. And it's really important, as you mentioned, yeah, when you're listening to it back in your imagination to say, oh, maybe I'll cut that bit out because the word just doesn't roll off the tongue, or there's almost little tongue twisters if you've got complicated numbers in your presentation or something like that. It can be, it might look fine on a PowerPoint slide, but when it comes out of your mouth, it can be a real garbled mess. So it's
Yeah.
lovely that you mentioned that. But I also know it drives people crazy because I know when I'm so many times I'll be sat in the passenger seat driving to give a presentation or a lecture, and whoever's driving me will look over thinking that there's something wrong because I'm sort of practicing, but I have to wave my hands around and I'm sort of going, and anybody that's driving past must think I'm an absolute lunatic, but it really helps to hear your own voice.
Definitely, definitely. And this whole thing of pre-hearing is also about the preparation side of it. If you go through that process, arduous though it may feel, you're putting your body it through the same sort of thing any athlete or actor would do in terms of preparing yourself for your talk. Your talk might be short, but your talk might not be short. And if it's not a short talk, you have to have the stamina to be able to get from the beginning of the talk to the end with the same resilience, enthusiasm, and engagement of your audience as if it was a short talk. So if you haven't practiced the whole thing from beginning to end, even in the pre-hearing stage, you might find you get up there and that you're very breathless, which actually brings me on to my next one point, um, which we can do.
Yeah, tell us what's the next on the list.
So I say that breath and being able to control your breath is one of the most key things that any presenter doing public speaking can own. If you can
Okay.
learn to master your breath, you can master any situation. And the reason I say that is because breath is not just about the actual final delivery. So you work a lot with people who are perhaps nervous about speaking in the first place, and you probably yourself experienced things like shallow breath
Hmm.
or anxiety surfacing and nervousness. And the first thing that gets affected when you're feeling nervous or you're anxious is your breath.
Mm.
And you think, well, why is that even important? Why is it important that my breath is affected? Well, if you're on stage and you're trying to talk and your breath is shallow or limited, instead of being able to concentrate on what you want to say and how you want to say it, you're in this situation where you're in deficit. Your body is scrambling, saying, I can't get my breath right. What do I need to do? And you're not going to come across as natural as if you were in control of your breath. So if you can learn to slowly deeply breathe into your diaphragm, which is actually my next point, you can control the situation. But I'll just do one exercise with you before we move on to that. And that is
Sure.
around just taking in a slow, deep breath and seeing how that can control your nerves. So if I say to you now, just take in a deep breath and count with your fingers on the screen in front of us how long that breath takes. Okay,
Okay,
without too
let's.
much thought, off you go.
Okay. Maybe four or five,
Yeah, great.
something like that.
Okay, now that's without too much thought, right? If you're feeling nervous and I said to you, I want you to count very consciously and deeply, as if you're breathing in through a little straw into your lips, like a cocktail straw,
Yeah.
not a milkshake straw. Okay. So take this breath in with me, okay? And it's going to be like this. It's going to be kind of
Okay, yeah.
where you feel your stomach actually taking in the air as if you're going to take a big breath before going into water.
Okay.
Okay. So breathing in, ready? Breathe in. Okay. Did you get to the same place as me?
No, I think I got to about 7, I'll be honest.
Great,
I
great.
might have been sucking really hard through the straw.
They're great, those straws. So already, because you're taking a much more conscious, slow, deep breath, you said between 4 and 5, and we went up to 7. So you've already improved your breath capacity a little bit. But moreover, in addition to doing that physical action of thinking about your breath, what you'll also find is that your heart rate will have slowed down. It will have dropped, which, if you're feeling nervous, is something everyone wants.
Mm.
To feel calm, in control, to be able to kind of like call on those buzzy moments of adrenaline to get you through it, but not so that you're so frenetic that people can't hear what you're trying to say and where you can't enjoy the performance you're trying to give.
Wonderful. So what's next with breathing? You mentioned
Okay.
there's even more to it.
Yes. So there's what we call diaphragmatic breathing. Now,
Okay.
lots of people talk about the diaphragm when we talk about breathing effectively. Certainly, if you're in the world of presenting on a stage as an actor or in music, whether you're up there as a singer or as an instrumentalist. But if you're breathing for the purposes of public speaking, you want to be able to control your breath and help to use it by way of energy and ammunition, so that when you deliver the talk that you want to give, that you're not running low in deficit, and that you can use it to really make you stronger, so that you can project out to where you want to project, and that you can bring everything down to a calm level. Now, if you think about your body, let's say the top half of your body as several parts of a diamond, because they're all diamonds, right?
I like the metaphor.
Now, a bit below your rib cage. Hang on, let me bring this down a little bit. Give you a little view of my rib cage. All right, so this is my rib cage along here. If I press my fingers under there, I can feel my rib cage, and in the middle here we have the sternum. Everything below that is my diaphragm. Now, what you want to be doing is seeing this little section here, which is the spongy bit, expand. And it's the bit below the rib cage. So that's what we call the diaphragmatic area. It's tucked under the rib cage there. So that's area 1, let's say. Now, area 2 is the ribs. Okay? So 1 is the diaphragm, 2 is the ribs, 3 would be your back, and 4 would be your chest. Or 3 and 4 can be the other way around.
Okay.
Now, what you want to do when you're breathing inwards is see a nice deep breath and an expansion of your diaphragmatic area. Okay, so let me
right down in the bottom there.
right down. So you want to see, if I press this in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Everyone's got it. Don't worry. We're not aiming to be all slim and 6-pack muscles. Right? You want to be breathing in, so you want to be going and see that expand.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if I got you to breathe,
quite a big difference.
It's a massive difference. So I got you to breathe into the count of 4 and hold, and then exhale. And for however long you feel you need to exhale before you feel your stomach muscle engage, that will slow everything down, and it will also help you to have a really deep, deep breath. Okay, remember, the more breath you've got in there, the more ammunition you have and energy that you can focus and send into your talk, right? Okay. So, fingers at the ready.
Yep.
Squeezing in a bit. Okay. So breathing in, 2, 3, 4, and just hold. Relax your shoulders. And now just exhale. And keep exhaling until you start to feel your stomach muscle pull inwards. Okay.
Yeah,
And then take a big relaxer breath. Okay. So it's gonna be a bit like this. It's gonna be breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Your stomach muscles, diaphragm has expanded. You hold for a count of 4, and then you exhale. And as you exhale, your stomach muscle is actually being pulled inwards, and the air is being pushed out. Okay, and then you take a big relaxer breath when all of the air's out, like you get in the films when someone's been like pushed, like they've been in the water, and then suddenly they like come up and they just like that. Okay, that's what you want to aim for. That's like the depth of the diaphragmatic breath. What you can also do, which if we spent longer working on all of this, is also thinking about the breath in your rib cage, which is what we can call reserve breath. And instead of breathing in through the straw, as I showed you earlier, we would be breathing in through the teeth. So if you just put one hand on your rib cage, and instead of going the whole time, towards the end, you're going to go, okay? Then to teeth. Can you feel an expansion just around your rib cage?
It's a little. Okay, yeah, it moves a little faster, I think.
It's different. It's a different expansion. So instead of it going just forwards and out where your diaphragm is, it then expands your rib cage, and that's where we carry what we call reserve breath. You'll also find sometimes if someone says take a big breath, people go, and you see that their shoulders raise up, and really the depth of their breath is about to here.
They're taking a sharp breath rather than a deep breath.
Shallow, yeah. It can be helpful, but if you want to kind of last a little longer, you want to be thinking deep and full. And those quick, you call them sharp breaths, I call them snatch breaths. And you're full, but it's going to have a shorter term impact than if you've got a lot of breath inside of you. And the last place is your back, where people think, well, how does that even work? Well, your body's just a sack, really. It's got bones and water in it. So when you're breathing in, it's not just this side that expands, it's also the back. So when you're really starting to focus on how to deliver a powerful presentation, you're thinking about your whole body and how to call on different parts and aspects of it for different things, whether it's to ground yourself with a really strong stance, and using that breath control in different moments, in different places in your body. So some people think of it as like a big energy rising from the earth through your body, up and out through your mouth. Others think of your whole body as being the thing that is the channel through which the message is delivered, which I'm a bit of a combination of both, really. I think, if you can learn to master all of that around your breath, you're winning. You're absolutely winning.
And Aneesa, just to clarify, when you're talking about using these kind of breaths, you don't mean only just before you're about to go on stage to calm your nerves. You're talking about we should use this throughout your speech as well, right? So it's going to help slow us down a little bit, have that bit more pacing, and those kind of things. It's going to make our presentation better in terms of timing as well, not just in terms of how we deliver.
Absolutely. You're calling on all of it all the time. If you think, what's the best weapon you have for when you're public speaking outside of the words, it's going to be your breath. If you can use that breath to punctuate, to accent, to emphasize, that will all hold you in really good stead.
And I notice as well that when people don't use this very deep breathing technique, you can often hear their voices cracking a little bit when they speak, because they're speaking just from using the air that's sort of just up here. Or you will often have a speaker where you can't hear what they're saying much past the fifth row of the audience, and they just become so shy and quiet. Whereas sometimes you have people with very loud, very clear voices, and you can hear them at the back of the theatre without a microphone because they're used to that kind of deep breathing, right?
Yeah, and actually that brings me on to my next point, which was going to be projection and physicality.
Ah,
Because if you have used your breath effectively and it's always there in reserve for you, you can project so much more effectively. So I'm going to do another exercise with you, okay? Ready? Right. Okay, anyone can do this. So I want you to just exhale as much of the air in your body as you can, and then call me. So I want you to go, Aneesa, come down here. But first exhale as
but
much
with
of the
no air in my lungs at all.
air.
So
Well, it's for survival purposes.
as long as I don't go purple. So folks go, Aneesa, Aneesa. Oh yeah, Aneesa. That's about as loud as I can go.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
out of 10, what would you score that about?
Uh, it sounds like a croaky mess. It's like a 2 out of 10. That's
Yes,
no good.
precisely. Now, I want you to do the same again, and this time try and say a sentence.
Oh gosh, with no air. The quick brown fox ran over the lazy dog. Oh, I could feel in the second part of the sentence,
Yes.
nothing's happened. It's like, oh, the first bit I thought, oh, that's not too bad, and then it just went.
Yeah, perfect. And so when you think about those moments where you might feel nervous, you're suddenly feeling very like breathless, possibly lightheaded, anxious, you do have this low level of breath. It's not that it doesn't exist at all, but the effectiveness of it and the power of it is really minimal. So we can still hear you, Adam, but we don't get the same powerful uh, delivery as if you had loads of breath in you. So if you do it one more time, but this time listen to yourself as you're saying it and just be conscious of what's going on in your body. So exhale and try and say a little sentence.
The quick brown fox ran over the lazy dog. Yeah, it's like I can feel myself pulling in there and wanting to take a breath.
Yes. Now you're an experienced speaker, so the chances of you experiencing that often are much lower than someone who's perhaps new or not prepared to public speaking.
Mm.
So
And
let's
especially
not
if they're
let's
in
not
like a high pressure situation, if they're at a big business pitch or it's their first day on the job
yes.
and they've got to introduce themselves, or if they're in some exam kind of thing where really got to stand up and defend yourself, you can be so nervous that yeah, the air's just gone, or you get asked that question that you're not quite prepared for, and you can be and,
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what I was going to say was like, let's not underestimate the impact that this can still have on really experienced public speakers. We're not saying that it's only those who are new to speaking that experience this breathlessness and this feeling of I can't get my breath. I need to almost yawn, or I need to just take a minute and oh, hang on, it's not quite there. It's not quite there. You know, so sometimes you need that minute to just reground yourself and see if you can find the rhythm of your heartbeat and your breath again so that you can deliver what it is that you want to say. So if you've got lots of breath in you, so now we're going to do the opposite in the exercise. I want you to remember what I said about taking a slow, deep breath in through your lips,
Mhm.
which actually I'll precede that with if you're feeling nervous before speaking, when someone else perhaps is talking and you know you're next, you take that slow, deep breath in through the straw. That can really help to ground you. So you're hearing someone talking away, they're being asked to introduce themselves, perhaps you're next, and you're suddenly thinking, oh, okay, my throat's a bit dry, my mouth's a bit dry. All right, what can I do? So you're taking that slow, deep breath in that no one can hear and only you are aware of. So you're if I'm just going to exaggerate it a little bit, it'd be like, right. Now, if I'm in a group of people, I'm not going to do it quite like that because I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious and nervous, perhaps. So I might do it more like, so
Oh
same
yeah, it's
thing.
almost silent, yeah,
And
but
it's so lovely because only you have that for yourself. No one else needs to know about it. It's something that you can rely on to just bring yourself back to a centered place. And then you know you're back and you've got lots of energy inside of you, ready to strike with your, accenting your consonants and all of that stuff that makes your delivery really powerful. So with the deep breath, I want you to do the same thing again, but this time at the end of it, aim for maybe a volume 5 out of 10 in your projection. So this is about you controlling it, because we can all be loud, but can we be controlled?
Okay. Volume 5 in the middle. And I am quite a loud guy, so we'll see. Cover your headphones. But let's give it a try. So with a big breath. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. It's a lot more controlled, actually, in comparison to the other one. I knew it would be, but I underestimated the lack of control when I didn't breathe properly. The first time I was just blurting out the sentence, but this time I felt like I could pause a little bit between each word as well.
You can play, and that's so much more fun, isn't it? So if I said to you, before we move to a different dynamic in terms of volume, stay there, stay at around 5 with your projection, and use your physicality, use the fact that you can play a little bit with the phrasing to change your delivery, so it's more in line and in tune with how you might like to deliver it.
Okay, I'll do it with a different read. Okay, let's try. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
Good. Now your volume did go up.
It did a bit.
Which is fine, but it's all part of the journey and exploration. So bringing it back to a 5, see if you can. I mean, I loved the
Tone it down.
in the middle.
It's because when you said to bring your physicality, and I start to move my shoulders and my arms a lot with words, because it makes things a bit more punchy.
Yeah, great, excellent. Same again. And you're playing with that dynamic. Maybe you're in a room telling the story to some children.
Okay.
But you can't be too loud because you might disturb the people next door.
Okay. I'm always disturbing the people next door. Let's see. Okay. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
Wonderful. Oh, it's so lovely. It's like, it's compelling, it's ripping. You're taking me on a journey just with those few words, because you're thinking about your projection. You're thinking about, I want to keep it here. I'm going to control it. Now, this doesn't arrive on its own. It only arrives once you've practiced a little and played. And that's the beautiful thing about voice, and why I love it so much, because you can play so much with your voice. Now, what we're going to do is just a slight offshoot on this, which is we're going to change where our soft palate is. So the soft palate is like the roof of your mouth and where you use your tongue and how you use your tongue. So if you raised your tongue a little bit and aimed for what we call a nasal twang, you're going to sound a little bit more witchy, perhaps country. So you could be going, the quick brown fox, or the quick brown fox, if you drop it.
Okay.
So you experiment with where your tongue is and how you control the air that goes through your nose or your mouth. If you send the air up through your nose, you have more of a nasal, twangy sound.
Okay.
It actually sounds some people don't like in themselves. So if you can learn to control where your tongue is and how you send the air through either your nose or mouth, that will change the sound that comes out.
Okay. Oh my goodness. So I have to give this a try. I think I tried the nasally one first. I think, because I have a very big nose. So we'll see. So is that the nasally sound? Is that?
Yes, that's very nasally. You still want to. That's a really great extreme example, but you still want to be understood.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh. It sounds ridiculous in my head. I'm really...
Put a hat on that you are acting on stage in character. Maybe you're you're the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood.
Okay, so
you're pretending to be a grandmother.
Oh, okay, so that's bringing it to the front a little bit sharper, right in the front, like that. Is that it? Like...
So your tongue's raised, the air is going up through your nose more, you sound more nasal.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just an example of how you can change your sound. You might not want to use that sound, And yet you might. But the point is, it's just knowing what's in your paint palette and what's available to you. And there'll be times where you'll say, you know what, I might just use that as an example.
Ah, yes, very good.
So that's your projection and physicality. And then my next point, leading on from projection and physicality, is dynamics. Now,
Dynamics, okay.
dynamics, I love dynamics. Ever since I was little, I've sung in lots of choirs, and I run choirs, I sing professionally, I speak professionally, and I think dynamics is one of the most important things that you can use to make your presentation compelling or not. And the
So,
reason is,
well, tell what is dynamics? Like, if you've never heard of dynamics before,
okay,
what is it?
so what does, if I said to you, um, what makes a speaker really interesting, if you took away the content of what they were saying in terms of the words and you're just listening, what makes them interesting?
Ah, okay. So that so it's like when you take away everything, you take away the words, you just hear the sound.
Well,
It's
think
like
of it
that
like that.
rhythm, that flow.
So louds, softs. So if we were speaking loudly the whole time, at some point you might get really fed up and bored of me and think she had a really interesting point to make, but she's just going on about the same point at the same volume the whole time. And I'm starting to doubt now whether she's actually got something interesting to say at all, because it's all the same high level the whole time. Now, if you're certainly,
I feel like you should be selling me a secondhand car or something.
you know, what's interesting is certainly when I look at some of the offers that are out there online at the moment, if people are talking about how to make an effective sales pitch, how to do a really good funnel, you know, you'll go onto some of these sites where someone will say click through to here and you'll see what's the word, webinar, and you'll get this person standing there almost shouting at you the whole time, and you're thinking, is there a reason for that? And then they keep you going and keep you going. Half an hour later they impart maybe one or two gems, but the whole time they've been trying to hold you in with this really high intense level, and you just have a headache at the end of it. You're just thinking, can't you just say it? Can't you just say it as beautifully as you said your line about the quick brown box earlier on? You know, just say it. So if someone is talking at a high level, a high volume level the whole time, their dynamics are really loud, forte or fortissimo in music, it's just too intense, it's too much. And equally, you get those people who speak really softly the whole time. Now, sometimes speaking softly can be great because it lures you in. But if I spoke this softly for half an hour, I can bet your bottom dollar you would be asleep by the end of my half an hour. So it's learning to use the dynamics, the softs and the louds effectively to make your presentation really interesting and compelling. So you don't want that what we call monotone either. So sometimes when people get up to do public speaking, they fall into the trap of having not prepared or not knowing how to manage their nerves and emotions and their breath. And their delivery becomes really, really samey. So instead of having what we call inflections, you have this kind of monotone feeling. The voice goes down there, it becomes really gravelly, and I'm trying to tell you just one thing that's really important to me, but for some reason I'm really nervous and I think I'm telling you, oh no, hang on, there was an inflection there, I think I'm telling you here. But what happens is you lose your audience because you're not any longer in control of what you're trying to say and how you're trying to say it. So you're not using dynamics for louds and softs, your voices become monotone, and ultimately, what you do is you lose your listener. So if I was going to ask you to give me an example of something around dynamics, could you think of one?
Well, it's interesting when you're talking about that because I'm thinking instantly of all kinds of different speakers that use dynamics brilliantly. And I was listening to some Jeremy Clarkson last night, and he will say the most normal thing about a car, but he will do it in a very particular way of moving his voice up and down, but also some nature documentary. Attenborough is so famous at having that whisper, but it's not always a whisper. It moves, and you're pulled in. And all those kind of things. So I definitely, as soon as you were talking about it, I was thinking of all sorts of different examples, and yeah. But would you like me to give it a try? Should I give it a try?
Yeah, give it a try.
So maybe I should go from something high to something like, okay, need to think I need to think about this. But one of my favorites that I like to do if I'm doing an announcer is starting quite high and then going more mysterious, where I might say, "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as tonight's performance will begin momentarily."
Momentarily. You just reminded me of the pantomime I didn't go to. But it's exactly that thing, isn't it? You're trying to create a sense of suspense, but also bringing people on the journey of what you're trying to say without being boring, whilst being slick and concise. So that was really lovely. Well done.
Thank you. But I've also heard it done the other way, where often it's a symptom of where people maybe they are doing the same speech again and again and again. Mm-hmm. I've seen tour guides who've given the same tour 100 times, and they're sort of, on the left you will see Spain, on the right you will see more Spain, and it's really straight. Or maybe if you've been to a wedding, and it's the 300 millionth wedding that the priest has done all day, and it's, do you? Yes. Do you? Yes, I do. You may kiss the bride. Da, da, da. And it's really straightforward, and it's not exciting at all when it's got that flatness.
Big boo. Yes. So you want to keep it varied. And that actually brings me on to the next point, which is punctuation and emphasis.
Okay.
So whilst it might sound like it's not important to have punctuation and emphasis, you might think, well, what do they mean anyway? Are we talking about, when you read something and you've got the right grammar in there? No. What we're talking about when we use the voice is emphasizing, and you could say accenting the key words in your message. So let's take, for example, I don't know, 3 things that you think people really need to make sure they do each day, right? You should get up and brush your teeth. You should put on some fresh clothes and try and get yourself outside. Okay, so 3 examples, right? If you just said each of those things in a very one after the other flow of conversation, you might lose the impact of it. You want to get up, brush your teeth, put on some fresh clothes and get outside. Okay, see you later, bye. But if you wanted to say it in a way that helped people stop and think and listen and assimilate what you're saying, you want to think about what key words you want to punctuate as you say them and what you want to emphasize. So on the toothpaste, get up and brush your teeth. Now you might think, well, that's a little bit over the top. Well, it is and it isn't, because this is the first time anyone is hearing what you're saying. You want to put on some fresh clothes. Not the same underwear or socks you wore yesterday. No. That's not going to cut the mustard, especially if you're going out on a date, but more for you. And then last thing, you want to get outside. There are so many different ways that you could deliver that. But if you can find a way to emphasize the key messages, it just makes everything stop for a second, pulls us back in the speed, and gives people time to assimilate the information. So get up, brush your teeth, put on some fresh clothes, and get outside. Now, you say exactly the same thing that I've just said, using some punctuation and emphasis. We should get 2 different but effective results.
Okay. Well, if I was talking to my son and I wanted to be very clear, I would be very direct, and I would say, brush your teeth, put the clothes on, and go and play outside.
Lovely. Now do it again and hear yourself and ask yourself, do I like how that sounds? Do I sound too didactic? Do I sound like he's going to take me seriously enough? Do I like the sound of my own voice in that moment?
He'd better do with the finger wagging too.
Finger wagging's always allowed. Physicality.
And I guess I could do it in a softer, more approachable way as well, but leaving better punctuation between each line to help him remember that there's three things that you need to do. So, brush your teeth, clothes on, play outside.
Right. Yeah, lovely. And of course, you touched on a really important point there, because if you say something in a way which you think sounds really clear, someone can hear that as a telling off, whereas someone else will just hear that as a simple instruction. So the more you play with how you use language and how it forms in your mouth and how you deliver it, the better it is for you when you're in perhaps negotiation situations or mediating or even presenting, because you'll be much more aware of how you sometimes come across simply because of how you used a word and how you used the breath in your mouth.
Because what I like about this when it comes to punctuation is we're used to writing with punctuation, but I often find it really helps to mark up scripts with punctuation to help me remember when to emphasize words. So I will often use three dots if I need a big pause, or I'll put more commas in than you would normally have, or using bold or italic or underline or highlighted to know when do I need to slow down, when do I need to speed up, where do I need to make a big point. And sometimes if I'm really hitting a big important point, I'll put each word on a separate line so that I know it really has to take some space around it. Because sometimes how we write words and how we say words, we get them sort of they go together in our brain. And if we're sat there reading a script and it's just one big wall of text, it can be tempting to skip most of the punctuation. And I've often seen when people are reading scripts, it's like they lose it. You know what I mean? They're reading something and then they get halfway through the sentence and then they realize they're boring themselves. Especially in business meetings where it's like, subject to the last season's sixth quarter reports of and I need some more emphasis in here, because it's hard to know what's important and what's not if you don't tell the audience what's important and what's not.
I think there's definitely something about how you make it your own. If you are really taking seriously the job at hand, there might be something about memorizing it. Now, I know different people have views about memorizing. My personal feeling, and from the 30 odd years of working with people around this, whether it's through singing or public speaking, is the more you've got in here, the freer you are to play with your delivery. So if memorizing something feels just way too daunting, firstly, put yourself under that pressure to see if you can. Because if you can, firstly, you might surprise yourself and find that you were able to do so. And I mean, let's say 98% of the people I work with are scared about whether they can memorize something, and 98% of those people do end up being able to memorize their talk. Also, you can rely on what's called, I created something called a script aid. So a bit like what you're talking about, where you might have ... If you're in control of the whole flow of your script, you can work out which words you need as stepping stone words almost to help you remember what's coming next, as opposed to a situation where you've got all of the words in front of you on a whole fully written out script, but you haven't twisted and turned that script into something usable. So it's a bit like when I was doing my exams, GCSEs, when I was 15, 16 years old, and we were allowed to take our books into the exam. I thought, wow, they're letting us take our books into the exam. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. It was one of the worst things you can let any student do, unless you've taught them how to prepare to use the book in the context of the exam. Because what happens is lots of panic moments can arise. You're suddenly looking at what was a very familiar text and you're lost in it because you've got a whole book in front of you and you're wasting precious time. But if you've highlighted the odd keyword in some sections that are your weak spots, let's call them, you can take that book in. It's the same with a script. If you've got a 40-page script in front of you, and you haven't gone through it and maybe condensed it into something usable, it's going to be a hindrance, not help. So if you're planning on taking anything on stage with you, make sure it's the minimum that you need to help you get through your talk. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing yourself a disservice.
Very good advice. So after emphasis, what's next? It says phrasing. Are we going to talk about phrasing?
So, a bit like when we started our conversation, I talked about how you don't want to listen to someone waffling on and on and on. You want them to have a sense of direction. You want to know where they're headed so that they can take you on the journey with them and you don't get bored and turned off. So in the same way as in music, where you are taken from the beginning of a passage of music to the next section, it's the same as when you're speaking in public. You need to have an idea of how to take your listener from the beginning of the sentence to halfway down the next paragraph, and the passage should flow. And if you haven't thought about that, then the chances are that your talk is going to be very waffly and boring. Who wants to be boring? No one. So the phrasing is about what happens if you think of a thread that goes over the whole phrase, the whole sentence, the whole paragraph. Within paragraphs, you have sentences. Within sentences, you have punctuation, you have commas, you have full stops. And if that was music, which I would argue words are, speaking to people is, what would you do to make it interesting? So you might put a little breath mark in somewhere. You might put an underline under a key word that you want to say a certain way. You might put a couple of bullet points just in front of some other words, which you would say to yourself, in that moment, I might raise my eyebrows and pause and look directly at the audience and just give them a little bit longer to take on board what I'm saying. But this idea that there's a phrase that has a direction and flow to it can just help engage the listener a little bit more than if you just rattle through from the beginning to the end of a paragraph.
I love that, and I love how you're talking about words as music, because I'm always obsessed with poetry, and as soon as you read poetry out loud, any poetry, you start to feel the rhythm and the flow of it, and yeah, it really is music, music of voice, and of course, when you're reading poetry, it's often very specially designed with the grammar and the how it's laid out, that you can only read it in a way that flows very, very beautifully, if it's the right kind of poem, of course.
Yes, and I mean, I think it's also interesting to think about the mileage of the words you're using. So if you're giving a presentation and someone has given you 3 minutes to ask yourself, do I need 3 minutes to put my point across? I think some of the most compelling and interesting talks are those where people are super concise, not so much so that it takes away some of the thrill and the drama and excitement of what's they're trying to put across, but there's no point in eking something out for the sake of filling time. I think what's more important is to find a really interesting way to present that information. And even today, when you listen to TED Talks, there are so many more things available to you than there were when they first ever started. So you might see people now incorporating visual aids. You might see people using props. You might even see a physical display of some sort that's creative, whether it's art or dance, to put their message across. But you don't have to use up every last second of what's given to you. Think to yourself, what's the most creative and interesting way that I can put this message across?
Yeah. And I'm often so impressed when when I'm working with, say, PhD students, and they've got something that's incredibly complicated, and they have to compress it down into a short amount of time, and they start to struggle with it because they think, but I need to tell everybody everything for them. And I have to remind them that when you can watch a TV commercial that lasts just 30 seconds and it tells you in 30 seconds the entire story of a product or a company or why you need it, and sometimes it's in very few words because they're picking just the most exciting features of the product. Maybe the product can do 100 different things, but they're selling you on just one. A supermarket commercial doesn't say, here is a list of everything you can buy and the prices and why. They'll pick the most important ones and then tell you that it's all about value or whatever it might be. And that's what sticks. Like having that ability to condense and be selective with words is very important.
Yes.
Nice. And then the next one that I see on your list it's almost the opposite of talking, is pauses.
Yes. And the reason I put pauses in there is because sometimes you want to get a point across, and the best way to do that is by emphasizing a word and pausing on it. And the other is by creating space with a pause. So if we take the first of emphasizing a word and pausing on it, sometimes that can help to just bring the listener one step closer to what it is you're trying to say. And the word onomatopoeic, where a word can sound like the way it's written, so or how it sounds. So let's take the word squelch. I said, I stepped into the puddle and there was a huge squelch. You were almost wasting the opportunity of creating a little bit of drama with the storytelling around that beautiful word. So if I spent longer hovering on the word, then suddenly it changes your experience as a listener of what I'm saying. So I jumped into the puddle and there was a huge squelch. So not only are you seeing physically something different in my delivery, but if I said to you, let's pretend we're playing a game where there's no sound. And actually, I do quite a lot of work with deaf people as well. So there's something about things like eye contact, eyebrows, gestures, facial expressions, which are really important, because if you bring that into how you're delivering something, someone will hear it or perceive it differently. So I'm going to say that sentence again, and then we're going to remove the sound, and I want you to act it back to me. Okay. So I jumped into a puddle and there was a massive squelch. Okay, so have a go.
So I have to act. I jumped into a puddle with a massive squelch, but without saying I jumped into the puddle with a massive squelch.
Yeah. And try and copy what I said and how I said it, as if you're mirroring what you just saw.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, I get you. Okay.
I'll do it again.
So yeah, okay, yeah. Let's see it.
I jumped into the puddle and there was a massive squelch.
So this is. Was that right?
Yes. I'll do the same now, back to you. Okay. So what I picked up from you is like the body language in the squelch and the energy as you were running through the phrase towards the word squelch, and like the arrival point of
there was a bit of a jump as well.
Yes.
But the squelch seemed a lot bigger.
Yes. So tell me what you see of me when I'm doing the same.
Okay. I definitely see the jump part is explosive. There's an explosive energy, but the squelch is more, it's more rounded, and you're taking a bit more time with it. It's definitely it's very clear it's the ending part. It's like the conclusion to the line.
Great. Now, if I wanted to improve upon that performance of myself, taking on board your feedback, which is what the job of the coach is. So we work with people, we listen to them, we watch them, and then we give them feedback. I would listen to what you said of my performance, and I think I want it to be more impacting. I want there to be a moment where everyone feels like they have jumped in with me in that squelch. So I'll try again. I jumped into the puddle and there was a massive squelch.
Yeah, that's definitely more powerful when you see with the body language. Definitely.
Yeah, and it includes the eyebrows, it includes the eyes. There's a lot in the shape of the mouth and the energy.
Yeah, your
That's
tongue was really out there for the squelch as well. It was quite deliciously gooey squelch.
visualize it differently as the listener than if I had just said, I jumped in the puddle and there's a massive squelch. You still see it, you still assimilate it, but your experience as the listener is entirely different depending on how I delivered it. So, using these different levels of pauses on the word makes your experience of delivering it different too, and it isn't necessarily a comfortable one. So you have to get used to how that feels and sounds. You have to feel comfortable so that when you're on stage or giving this talk or telling this story, that you don't feel uncomfortable, which a lot of people do when they're first starting to use their voices and present. So it's worth practicing it again and again and again, even if you don't feel it, to go through the motion and to get used to it, because that moment will come and go. Sometimes people get stuck on it and think, oh, I can't do that bit. It's awful. It's awful. And I always just say to them, it's a moment in time. It passes. It will come and it will go as quickly as you say it. So allow yourself to sit in that discomfort for a moment if it feels uncomfortable, and then just move straight on, because you'll be thinking about it more than the people who are listening to you. They'll be still in that moment of, oh yeah, that sounded really cool. All right, now what's coming next? So you can use pauses really effectively.
Yeah, I do like the idea of perhaps watching yourself back on video with the sounds turned down, just to see where your body is emphasizing different pauses, and to see how long you're taking breaths for, or if you're just rattling on. Oftentimes, I like to watch video playbacks of people talking, but in double speed or triple speed, so it's sort of fast forwarded, because then you really can see when people do repeating patterns, because when you're first starting out, you're often repeating the same thing or speaking in the same way, or maybe you're just, if your hands go like this, when you see it in fast forward, all you see is and they're like, that's your only body language. You can bring it in, you can mix it up, and then you can see the big points when the movement changes, when it's in that sort of fast speed, and you're not so much listening to what they're saying, but watching how they're saying it. So I quite like that idea. That's really good. But Aneesa, after pauses, we have silence. Can you tell us a bit more about silence?
Silence is almost a continuation of pauses, but it's even bigger. The power of silence and saying nothing while people assimilate your words is huge. If you can learn to sit comfortably with the discomfort of silence, that can move you leaps and bounds in so many contexts. So I don't know if I've shared this with you, Adam, but prior to training as prior to working as a professional singer, I actually trained as a barrister, so a lawyer in England. And one of the things that we practice a lot is the art of advocacy. So it's how to present, how to speak, to get your message across, how to win an argument in legal matters. And if you can learn to sit with the discomfort of silence, you can help to shift all kinds of scenarios, ranging from a negotiation or a mediation between maybe divorcing couples, or a criminal who in a moment may change their mind about what they say to you and how they say it, to a jury who are going to hear information that can be quite difficult to hear, because you're giving them time to sit with the information you're giving them. So I'll give you an example. If I was going to say something which might not feel comfortable to you as a listener, and I give you no time to assimilate that information, and then some time to assimilate that information. I want you to tell me how it feels, because we're humans at the end of the day. We're not robots getting up and speaking, we're humans. So our words have impact on an emotional, not just a practical level. Okay, so let me impart this information to you and let's see how it sounds. The defendant killed his mother. Okay, so I've said it just trickled off my tongue. The defendant killed his mother, just like that, right? Now, if I say it slightly differently, you'll have a different experience of how it sounds and feels.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The defendant killed his mother.
Yeah, the first way, it's very sort of matter of fact. It's very, very sort of like you're stating a fact, but the second time it was a little bit more emotional when you think, oh, he must have been going through something to kill his mother, and maybe it makes you think, oh, perhaps he's a victim too because he's just lost his mother. Maybe it builds a bit more compassion, or has a bigger impact. Like it makes it seem a lot more serious, the second one, whereas the first one could be just like something you'd read in the newspaper.
Yes, excellent. And now, of course, context has everything to do with it. If we knew the story behind what happened and why, if I trickled off my tongue, the defendant killed his mother, and this is at the end of all of the proceedings. This is summarizing of everything that's happened. We have very little sympathy for the defendant at this point. And as a member of that jury or someone listening in, you could be swayed in how you decide to make your decision when giving a verdict to the judge. Equally, if you come to the same conclusion in your head and you heard the defendant killed his own mother, you would also have an idea in your head which isn't necessarily based on truth. It's based on the power and the convincing aspect of the performance of the barrister. So there's just something to think about when you're giving information, that if you can sit with a silence at some point in that sentence. I mean, in this sentence, it's actually right at the end. I'm not pausing in the middle. There's no silence in it. The defendant killed. Who did he kill? His mother. So how does that change your experience of what you hear and what you perceive?
Yeah. And I think silence is really interesting to me because when I see inexperienced speakers, the first thing that they love to do is fill every millisecond of silence with an or an ah or a maybe or some noise because we think that silence is really bad. But then the speakers that I see that are phenomenal and are capturing their audience, they will often say, oh, I don't judge it on the applause, I judge it on the silence. Because when you're telling a really good story and you're about to reveal what happened or what's around the corner or what's inside the treasure chest, when you can hear the pin drop in the room, that's when you know that the audience is listening to you, when there's not a single cough or anything. It's deadly quiet. And if you get the audience deadly quiet, they say that's when you know that you've got them with a really good story. So isn't it strange that the thing that perhaps we can be most uncomfortable of is actually one of the biggest signs of success, especially when it comes to storytelling?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really nice example. And I mean, that's why I think saying to any client, see if you can learn to sit in the discomfort of the silence. So sometimes when I'm coaching people, especially when they've got a difficult relationship perhaps to negotiate with someone, whether it's in business, whether it's personally, one of the first things I'll say to them is, see if you can sit in the discomfort of the silence. Don't jump in and fill that gap with anything. You don't even have to respond. Find a way to sit with yourself and maybe even just nodding and acknowledging with eye contact, but don't let yourself fill the space with words, because that can be a crucial moment where the outcome will be different because you filled the space. And I know I've gone back to divorcing couples, but it can be really powerful to say what you want to say and then say nothing when you're feeling disempowered. I mean, that's just one context. Obviously, there can be many. There can be you could be asking your boss for a raise. You could be trying to present something in front of a board of trustees. And if you can just sit with the discomfort of that silence and own it and make it powerful for you, suddenly more doors can open and other bits of conversation can come into the space. And equally, when someone says something that you don't feel comfortable with, see if you can avoid responding immediately. Just give the words time to settle in the room, give everyone a chance to assimilate it. If you want to make a note, and you can say, that's an interesting point, I'll come back to you about that. Don't feel forced into mustering up breath and energy to respond, because you might find that if you'd had time to take that away, that information away, your response would be different.
And then definitely when you find yourself in high pressure situations where perhaps you're not so prepared. So in a business meeting, for
Yes.
example, and something comes up, or if you're being interviewed, or there's a questions and answers session, I think that often there's that massive pressure to answer the question right away and be really,
Yes.
really quick. But the more that you can show that you're taking the time, and the more that you can look like you're, well, when you're silent, you look like you're really considering the answer rather than just coming back on the attack. I remember a lot of TV news reporters when they were interviewing celebrities, and they wanted the celebrities to spill the gossip about their latest scandal or whatever it is. They would say, well, the celebrities are so used to being asked questions, so all you do is you ask the first question and then you shut up, and they will fill in the gaps with the rest of it. So if you say, oh, how's it going with your rock star husband, and then you don't say anything, then maybe any problems might come up if you don't rush on to the next question. But you're like, okay, give me more. I'm not gonna
Yes.
I'm not gonna answer. I'm not gonna fill the awkward silence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And well, there shouldn't be any more awkward silences between the two of us, because we're on to the very last one on your list, the last tip. So can you share that with us, Aneesa?
So last and perhaps first, depending on which order you decide to come to it in your mind, is voice exercises and practicing vocalizing. So
Okay.
I would say, as with singing, as with acting, we use exercises to warm up our bodies and also our voices to become strong. So you will very rarely see an actor or a singer warming up without warming up both their voices and their bodies. And the reason for that is we are all like one instrument. So if we're not warming up our physical selves, then our voices won't have the best chance possible to come across really effectively. So physical warm-ups range from everything around like massaging your face, just to start to become really aware of the fact that you're going to use this part of your body to to do some presenting, to the breathing exercises, some of what we did earlier, even stretching. It's not uncommon to see singers and actors stretching their bodies, taking a nice deep breath in, slowing everything down, really becoming aware of everything that's available to you when you're going to do your presentation, when you're going to do your talk. And one of the things we do when we're thinking about our voices is we start with the breathing. So just a simple exercise where I'll say to you, breathe in for the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, exhale, and then we change it from a breath to a sound, and that sound can be a zzz or a shh. There's all kinds of different sort of breathing exercises that move into vocalizing exercises. And then things like what we call sirening, and that's where you take a word like the word sing, and you hover on the N and the G, and that sends the sound through your nose more, but it forces you to move up and down your vocal range. And for pitching, when you're speaking, that's really important. Do you remember we said don't stay monotone?
Hmm.
So with sirening, you would just go sing. And it sounds odd, but what you're doing is you're waking up your body, you're waking up your voice, you're starting to hear your own voice in different pitches and places. There might be long vowels that you'll just start to articulate. Even if you're just speaking, don't underestimate the power of using a melodic sound. So I say singing to warm your voice up. So just even a simple thing like ha 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 ha. So one note, but different sounds. And then we're moving to a different place. Ah, ah, but from the diaphragm, not from here, not this what we call the glottal stop sound. But you're taking control of all the different tools in your toolkit when you're doing your presentation and talking. So the more you warm your voice up, the more you'll be ready to do your presentation and your talk powerfully and effectively. If you don't warm up, it's not the end of the world, but it's going to hold you in so much better stead if you do.
Yeah.
So that's my last one. I mean, I don't want to hover on it all too much because actually you could spend hours, just literally hours, going through all of the different kinds of warm-ups and, sirening, physical warm-ups and things that you could do. But that's when you'd probably get a coach and spend that time creating a plan for you so that you're in control of it. But there you have it.
That's wonderful.
Top 10 tips.
Well, thank you so much, Aneesa. They're really useful tips, and there's something in here that everybody can use. What I love about your advice is I think it helps open people up to the possibility that their voice is just a little bit more than what they would expect. Because most of the time in our day-to-day lives when we're talking, we're using a limited range, we're using a limited volume, but we're capable of so much more, from the high notes to the low notes, from the whispers to the shouts, and everything in between. And you're exactly right when you say it's like a toolbox of which to pull from. You don't have to be loud all the time, you don't have to be quiet all the time, but you have to know when to use the right tool for the right job and tell the story and emphasize it in the right way. So Aneesa, thank you so much for joining us, and I've really enjoyed the time that we've spent, and I've certainly learned some new interesting things. I'm going to try quite a few of your tips, so thank you so much for sharing that with us all.
Thank you for having me, Adam. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Bye.